That's at 7 o'clock Central Standard Time, live on Facebook and YouTube. Sure! Sure, there's Joe Rogan with 257,000 million trillion subscribers. Anybody can pull that off. So when you come to Brad Stine Has Issues, you want something fresh, new, something that hasn't been manipulated before, something that isn't redundant. Show us, Brad, why we keep coming back over and over again. I'll tell you why. Sure, Rogan has the numbers, but I have this. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, what's that? Where'd we get that? Okay, nice. Wait a minute, is he gonna take it to new levels? Is he actually gonna, wait, how about if he was to twist that like that, mix that over? So then, that's right. Who else gives you balloon animals? That's right, Wyatt. We're on our way, son. We're gonna be the biggest hit in town. We do it all. Just call me a Renaissance man. This is Brad Stine Has Issues. This is the balloon. And this is our song. Let 'em have it, son. You know, without the headphones, I can't hear when the song's over.
Well, I'll let you know that it hasn't.
Okay.
Now it has.
You know, I gotta be honest with you guys. I love it when 7 o'clock rolls around every Monday and you people keep showing up. This is God's Comic Brad Stine. This is Brad Stine Has Issues, where comedy, conservatism, and Christianity collide in a cacophony of clarity. Whatever you need to know, whatever you need to be inspired by, anything that can change your life, there's nowhere else to go but the Bible and me. This is my son, Wyatt Leroy Stine. Wyatt constantly messes things up, and yet he doesn't whine or complain. You know why? Because he knows his dad's going to pay him anyways. Wyatt, what has made your life so miserable that you've decided to become a podcast with your old man?
Well, sorry, I was too busy trying to figure out where on earth you had the time to learn balloon animal. What's the term for man who make balloon animal?
Balloonologist, yes.
When did you learn how to do that?
Well, I picked it up from YouTube. I wanted to get some mentoring, and I thought to myself, you know, the numbers are constantly rising. We're getting bigger and bigger guests. The people are loving our podcast like they're like none other. And I thought, you know what's missing, though? And I think I've always felt like this, and I probably have talked to you about this in my spare time. I said, what's missing is balloon animals, because I find it's an underrated art. I find that people have lost a lot of respect for it. A lot of the beauty of the art has seemed to be lost in the ages. Of course, as you know, Michelangelo, before he carved David out of marble, first fashioned him in the form of a balloon animal, so he'd have a working model, and it allowed him to move it.
So let me get this straight here. You learned balloon animalisty so that you could learn a underrated art. I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's an underrated art?
Well,
I think what else is underrated? Ventriloquism.
Yeah.
You know, the subtle art of talking to yourself.
Right.
Wonder why that one ain't mainstream.
Well, it kind of is mainstream. You know, Jeff Dunham is a...
Jeff Dunham's like the only one I know of that does that and anyone cares about.
Okay, well, in the 30s, Charlie McCarthy was hugely popular on radio. Matter of fact,
on radio?
He was on radio.
Wait. A guy whose whole act is making it look like he's not talking is famous in a form of media that doesn't involve looking at him.
Right. Why can you think of him?
You know, they could have just had two people in that recording studio and gotten the same results.
Why, you understand the genius of that.
No, I don't. In fact, Enlighten me. What is the genius of that?
I'll give you an example. I want to start an art museum, and I want to sell my art for, millions of dollars. But what makes my art unique is when you come into my gallery, all the lights are out, so it's complete pitch blackness. And then I bring you to each one of my artworks and decide if you want to buy it and how much you want to pay. So to me, it's the same kind of a thing.
No, it's not.
You want to eliminate the proof that you suck at this, but then capitalize on it by giving people the illusion that if you don't see the beauty in this, maybe it's on you.
I understand that, but there's a very big difference between you hosting an art gallery in pitch blackness and Da Vinci releasing the Mona Lisa in pitch blackness. One of those things just doesn't seem to add up.
I don't even understand the correlation.
Correlation is if you're famous at something that involves you being seen and you purposefully choose a media that doesn't involve you being seen, there's no point for you being there. Your whole thing was, look what I can do. And the way you want to advertise that is, no, you can't look at me do it, though.
Like, what?
Look, if this
you don't see the brilliance in that. This guy pulled off the biggest con job in human history.
It's not a con job if he's actually skilled, though.
He wasn't.
It's just poor planning.
Listen, he ended up in TV or movies where he would have his Charlie McCarthy doll. And now you've seen the Charlie McCarthy doll because he was like in a tux and he'd have a monocle and a top hat. He was a very famous ventriloquial doll.
Yeah.
The guy's name was Winchell. I think it's Winchell. But his daughter ended up being an actress. Anyways, I just thought that it was brilliant that he pulled it off. When you saw him actually do his act with Charlie, by the way, you could see his lips move. So he clearly got into ventriloquism, worked out his routine, looked at himself in the mirror, realized he didn't have the goods and thought, you know what I can do? I can either quit and go become a mechanic, go work at Lowe's, or I'll just get into radio and they'll never know what hit them. So that to me is brilliant. And that to me is American ingenuity, which you need to respect, my son. We got to go find out who showed up tonight.
Well, all right. How much, on the count of three, we both shout who the first one on the stream is?
Yes. One, two, three. Dusty Wilhelm.
Don't get used to it. You see what you do, Nick Crust, when you don't show up on time, you make this happen.
Wyatt! How did we synchronize? What have you done, son? Have you actually learned another technique in the production that you've never had before? Because you usually have like one, and have you added another arsenal, like a synchronization of people saying hi, and I get the same guy you do? I'm so proud of you, son, that you found your second button.
Close. Nobody showed up for 2 minutes.
Really?
Yeah. It was like 7:02 when people started coming in.
Nobody got their
it was the first time I've ever seen the comments be empty when we started this thing.
Wow. Okay, well, guess who's here? Dusty Wilhelm. Hello, friends. Chris Feldhausen. Hello, everyone. I like how he doesn't want to leave anybody out. You know why? He's a good man, Wyatt.
But doesn't that mean...
What have I always said about the Feldhausen clan? And don't lie, he needs some insight.
The good man.
Yeah. Good evening from Huntsville, Texas. That's Andy Klein. You know Andy. He's from the Klein folk.
Of course. The Klein. We talk about them all the time.
Or the decline of America. And that's what we'll talk about later.
Or the incline of the decline.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. But that's always trying to get up over that hill, son. James Lyons, hi from Water Valley, Mississippi. Rebecca Daly Dwyer, there's my little three named lady. Hello from Bellefonte, Pennsylvania. Hello to Wyatt also. She always gives you that extra hello, Wyatt. She doesn't just say hello, Brad, and then hello, Wyatt. Tell hello to everybody, but especially Wyatt.
It's well, she knows who the talent is.
Oh, Paula Faye Marie Raucci, my favorite four-named lady. She's here. Hello to America. Hello, God bless America. Cindy Blattler. There's Bevan McMenamin. Man, that's a hard name to say. McMenamin. Ooh, that's rough. She's giving me some hugs from Iowa. And why did I feel those hugs? And you know what they feel like?
What?
Corn.
Oh.
because she's from Iowa. Ministries,
wow.
Elim,
Iowa jokes,
Dallas,
huh?
Fort Worth. Ministries, Elim. Sorry, I Moses you when you came to Arlington. I really wanted to see your show. Maybe I'll catch it on DVD. Oh, he Moises me. I thought maybe he was giving me some kind of street jargon, some kind of urban dictionary stuff that I don't understand as a straight white conservative Christian male, but he just missed you. Carrie Tudor. Hey, Brad and Wyatt, Kinsman, Ohio, back to see you. Where you been, Carrie? And what the heck gives you the right to jump on and jump off as though we don't miss you? We do. Wyatt, tell Carrie what we think about her when she's not here.
Oh no! Where art thou?
Yeah, that's sweet.
Come
He always.
back, come hither!
I think your Shakespearean element, Wyatt, is added the sophistication that this podcast has missed, other than the balloon animal.
Well, I mean,
Michelle Guirette. Hey, Brad from New Hampshire. Aw, you know, Old Hampshire isn't doing well, but New Hampshire still hanging on.
What about this Hampshire? How's that doing?
I'm Hampshire. Dan Sutton's here, and he's got a crying emoji. Keith Lipsy, greetings from the first Orange County, New York. It sure is. Jim Brona, listening in the car tonight, coming in loud and clear. Brad and Mike. Listen, Jim, I'm glad you're listening in the car. My hope, my dream, my prayer, that you're not listening in the car with the engine running, in the garage with the door shut. Why would I say that, Wyatt? Be honest. Wyatt.
Don't know. I just don't know.
Peach.
I'm not used to being this engaged this early on.
You're engaged? Son, you never told me. What's she like?
Like this joke, imaginary.
Ah, that's sweet. Pete Shedlowski, thanks for coming to Man Camp in Green Bay. You were hit. Wyatt, I went to Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I rode snow machine with Mark Gunger, the pastor friend of mine there. 2.5 hours,
I'm
60
sorry.
miles.
You went to Wisconsin, and there has been not one cheese joke. But no, balloon animals, that's gotta be here.
Huh.
Your priorities, get them straight.
Well,
Heck, well, why not just double down on the whole thing and make the balloon animals be a ventriloquist act?
maybe I was going to save the cheese
No,
joke.
what you need to do is you have to do a ventriloquist act with the balloon animal, but the animal's the actual comic, and you are the puppet. I'm sure no one's done it before. It'll be genius. I see no issues with this.
Wyatt, I wanted to do a Green Bay cheese joke, but I wasn't quite sure if the people would be cultured enough to get it. Kara Boyd! Hey, Brad,
You
Wyatt,
do this to me
all.
now? You do this to me now? How dare you?
Ah. Ooh. Thought you'd say that for lactose. Hey, Karen Rochelle, we can all come out now. The balloon is down. Ah, she was hiding, though. Nick Kress, hello, Brad. Meeting at church went long tonight. I'm glad you have a long church. And they do have a long church, Wyatt. It's one of the first churches I've ever been to that's only 6 feet wide, but it's 200 feet long. It's very odd.
Also,
but they're great for if you have a toy train.
I think we need to stop with the puns because bro Derek Phillips is experiencing emotional turmoil from them.
Why?
He's crying in the chat. We've made him cry with our puns.
Broderick Phillips? He said, hi, Brad Stine. Karen Boyd, I'm watching on YouTube on my TV. It's great to see Brad Stine life size. And when I'm life size, son, I come in at a whopping 5'6". Why? Because I'm short. And and why do you keep bringing it up? I don't bring up your, problems.
Yes, all the ones you can clearly list because they have so many.
James Voigt's here, and guess what he
Like
said?
you.
Balloon dog fresh from USA flight. Let's see. Anybody else here that I haven't said hello that's new? Boom, boom, boom. Benjamin showed up. Hey, Benjamin, thanks for coming, brother. And he said, welcome, God's Comic Brad Stine. Benjamin is always sophisticated that way. He's always sort of a professional. Let me bring in hey, welcome him. Like he's in the army. He's a military type. Don't you think?
I'd say so, yeah.
Yes. Nick Kress, yeah, give someone else a chance, Sir Nick. It's Saint Nick, but good try. See, Karen should know that by now, White. You know what it is, the Xanax kicked in. Forrest Bainey's here. Hello, White and Brad. I'm back from vacation. Spent a week on the NCL Prima in the Gulf. Great time. Good for you, and thanks for rubbing it in. Mr. Moneybags. What is it with Forrest Wyatt? Always showing everybody else up when he's at an Airbnb on the coast while the rest of us slum it.
Well,
and I'm making balloon dogs, trying to hold on to this podcast by freaking nails of my fingers, nails. Meanwhile, you get paid. I don't get jack. I don't get it.
Well, I mean, you may not get paid.
Yeah.
And I may get paid.
Yeah.
But you see, that's okay. Anyway, moving on now.
Hey, Keith Hoffman came up with Edgar Bergen. That's it. And later his daughter Candace Bergen. There you go.
Yep.
Broderick Phillips is laughing. Justin Wilhelm is putting Nicky Kress, or what we call him, Saint Nick, down because he beat him. Amelia Miyazawa Neculus. Hi there. You know where she's from?
Canada.
No, Romania. Where is she watching from?
Canada.
Japan.
All right. Yeah,
Finally,
it
you're.
was a whole week, man.
I
Get
know.
over that.
Sue Calico's here. Tom Cotter. Hello, Grasshopper. That's how he speaks because he has that John the Baptist fetish. He eats grasshoppers and lives in camels here. Let's see. Muscle Shoals, Alabama. A lot of famous songs came out of that place, Wyatt. A lot of famous music. That's Broderick Phillips. Sue Diedrich, held from Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm going to gamble that she likes living there. Anyways, let me think. Hey, Bevan McMenon says, my nickname is Opal. Call me that if it's easier. What do you mean, if it's easier? You waited for a frickin' 2 months to let me know I could just call it Opal and not stumble over Bevan McMenon? What the heck?
Well, to be fair, it is funny when you try to butcher and fail to pronounce that.
That's easy for you to say.
Yeah, I mean, I butchered a basic English sentence. You're
Quiet.
butchering a name that's kind of hard to pronounce.
Quiet. Shauna Frederick showed up again. You know how she comes in and comes out like a ninja?
Yep.
She's back. You notice how she always wears a fedora and black glasses? You know why?
No, I honestly, surprisingly, never noticed that. It wasn't anything on my mind.
That was her scheme. Be unnoticed. But Brad does, because he's God's coming. God gives him the insight. Ashley Woods, hold the line. Hello from Tennessee. Me too. Douglas Kroll, this is fought. Hey, hey, hey. Don't know what that means. Danny Herring, hello, Brad and White. Where does Danny live?
Canada.
Yes! And what is her life like in Canada? One word.
Oh, wait, hold on. Do I have a button for that?
Hit it, son.
Yep, there it is.
I know. I can't hear because, you know, you've never found
What do you mean
out.
you know if you just said you didn't hear it?
I just assumed. Hey, from Green Bay, and I can take a joke. Keith Westergaard. Sure you can. And Sue Collicoat from Ohio. Let's see. Broderick Phillips says, I'm laughing so hard I'm in tears. Does that mean, son, that he is happy or unhappy? Have you ever laughed till you cried, or did you ever cry till you laughed? Do you ever cry, son?
No, what? No.
Do you ever have diarrhea?
No.
Okay.
I don't think. What are the signs to look for?
Hey, listen, I got to tell you something.
Yeah, this
You know how some people come on new to the podcast?
Yeah, just ignore
They're
me,
brand
that's
new,
fine.
right?
Yeah.
Well,
Phone
Sue
outdoors like I am.
Sue Diedrich showed up, and she said, I'm new.
Okay.
Say hi to me. Now,
No,
what,
not.
Now, you know me well.
Yeah.
Do you think that if Sue Diedrich shows up out of the blue and then somehow tries to coerce me to say hi to her, what you think I'm going to fall for that
No,
nonsense? Do you think I'm going to mention Sue Diedrich? No, because she just showed up out of the blue. She hasn't donated. She hasn't participated. She's not part of the militia of the mind, and yet she wants some props. Son, I have to draw the line, and you know where I draw the line?
She didn't even pay the $5 hello fee.
Do you know where I draw the line? Sue Diedrich. That's where I draw the dang line, son.
I thought you were going to say Canada for that.
No. Let's see. Anyways, we gotta move on here because see Danny here in Canada. Wyatt, live it. No, sum up Danny's life in one word. She lives in Canada and she's under Justin Trudeau. Sum up her life in one word.
One word. I can't think of anything worse than terrible. Help me out here.
That works.
Well, yeah, but is it really strong enough of a word?
Do you remember when Forrest Bainey came on and said that he was on a vacation? He talked about being on the, this and that, and I said, "Come on, dude, do you have to rub it in?" Well, he came back later. I'm thinking he's going to apologize, humble himself, say, I won this in a lottery. Somebody paid it for me. I'm on my last legs. I figured I was going to treat myself. No, he comes back and says Norwegian Cruise Line cruise. So now he's bragging about the cruise he was on. What is it with Forrest Bainey that he believes he's better than the rest of us and can't keep it to himself? I don't know.
Because it's true.
Yeah. Do you know that Sue Diederich, even though I already gave her all the props she wanted, said thank you for pronouncing my name correctly?
Uh-huh.
I didn't have to do that.
Yep.
Hey, Rancho, New Mexico. Rio Rancho is here, Bill Atwood. Anyways, Karen Boyd just said feel buried to Carrie Tudor, and that's a sweet thing to do. Well, listen, we've got to get to the show, because there is a show here, from what I understand. It started out years ago when I decided to start on this podcast during the Corona cult, or the cult of the Corona, which was the beginning of the end of the world as we know it. But I jumped on, started a little podcast, which was a Facebook Live, just to say hi. People said hi back, and next thing you know, I've got a banner and a logo. But Wyatt, I was in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and I was driving around on a snow machine. Now, when I say snow machine, what do you think of? What do you think I'm referencing?
A secret government project to control the weather?
Yeah, but that you're not supposed to say that.
Well, listen, I'm using the old playbook rule. If you say something conspiracy like, no one believes you because clearly you're insane.
So speak it out loud, and people would just ignore it as though it couldn't possibly
and then
be
acknowledge you're speaking it out loud to throw them off the trail.
Wow. Speaking of trails, I was on a snow machine trail, and I went 60 miles. We went 2.5 hours blasting on this trail up north of Green Bay. It was snowy. It was cold. When I first arrived, it was 8 below. Do you see me complaining about 8 below, by the way? Am I complaining about it, son?
I don't see you complaining externally.
Right. I'm complaining on the inside. The good news is it was 8 below, which means you go outside, your bladder freezes, and you have to pee for 2 months. That helps you a lot. Saves you get up in the middle of the night and go into pee. What?
How does that help you to be in constant agony for 2 months?
Because your bladder's freezing. You don't feel it, son.
But
I'm just saying.
Just continue the story.
So I drive around with Mark Gungor. Mark Gungor is a pastor who has a very famous marriage conference called Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. And he put out a video on YouTube a few years ago called The Tale of Two Brains. So what he does is he has the male brain and the female brain, and he explains to people why men have a different way of seeing the world and women have a different way, and why they don't communicate or connect properly, because we see things differently. We don't have the same means of communication. That thing went viral, and it ended up getting like 20 million, 30 million hits, blew up. Anyways, he got pretty well known, and so he does marriage conferences all over the place. But he did a manly man conference back years ago, and he brought me in as a man to do a work for men, and we did what was called Man Camp. I went up with them, and guess what they had? They had during the noontime, they had meat gathering, and every guy would bring meat that he had harvested. Guess what I ate? Okay, there was 2 sausages. One was called cabbage sausage, so it was sausage fixins, but they mixed cabbage in it. The next cabbage was potato sausage.
Okay.
So they put potato as a filler in with the sausage. You're thinking, okay, that's interesting, but not so big. Then I see a fully skinned rabbit, full on layout out like this, that they're roasting. So I'm eating a rabbit off the thing. Oh, and then a guy shows me him hunting a black bear. It's on his phone. I'm watching him. You see, dog had cornered the bear up in the tree. You see this bear pinwheeling down. Killed the bear. Guess what I was eating, son?
I'm sorry, a dog chased a black bear up a tree.
Yeah. That's what he did.
In that case, I know exactly what you ate. A coward.
What do you mean? A coward.
Okay, size of dog.
Yeah.
Size of bear.
Yeah. Bears
How
are big.
does dog frighten bear? A bear is like 20 dogs in a trench coat.
Well, it's not a grizzly. So it wasn't some like
that-
10-foot tall giant bear. It was like, I don't know, maybe it was 4 feet. There's smaller bears.
Black bears are not 4 feet tall.
Well, they are when they get started. I don't know if you aware this, but when your child is born, they're not 6'8". They start out like that.
I get that, but like, dude, I hate to say it, but you may be short, but you're not short enough to ride one into battle.
Well, anyways, I ate it. I ate bear, son.
How was it? Was it the bare minimum what you were expecting?
Well, I wasn't sure if I was going to like it because I thought it might be gamey, but I got to tell you, I took a bite, chewed it, swallowed it, and it was bearable. Oh, I wish I had.
You used my pun though. Does that really count?
I wish I could not be me for a second, so I could watch me.
You could listen to that sentence in the first half. I'm not gonna lie.
Anyways, I wanted to talk to you guys today before we get to our guest, and we have a wonderful, amazing guest that I interviewed. And as I've told you guys on other occasions, and if I haven't, I'll tell you now. I would prefer, and I don't know if it's even possible, but I would prefer to do the interview live. In other words, have the guests come on while you guys are watching me live, talk to them live. I'm not obviously the live guy when they're sitting here, and we've had a few of those, and I want to have more of those, but they're trickier. You have to be in Nashville, you have to be available, and you have to be willing to do it for no money and not ruin your reputation. And that's a roll of the dice. Clearly, you come on my show. But when I do the interview that through through the internet, the virtual interview, we have to pre-tape it. Now, the reason we pre-tape it is when we tried to do it live through our system, it would always slow up, and that's when you guys would watch, and it's like my mouth wouldn't match to the sound, and it was kind of like a ventriloquist act on the radio. But anyways, nothing matched. And it was terrible, and it would lag, and you guys would go crazy, and some of people jumped out of windows, other people took cold plunges, even others ripped their own eyes out and gave themselves lobotomies. So we thought maybe we should move in other directions because this is causing physical harm to folks. So we stopped doing it. So that's why now. So the bad news is they're not there live. If they were, and as you're seeing, some of these guests are very interesting. And I would love for you guys to ask a question to a guest, like when Bart Millard was here, or Millard as he calls himself. Guy can't even pronounce his own name properly, but. You could ask questions, so I would rather have that where you all could ask questions because you see a good guest, you say, I'd like to ask a question. You never get that opportunity. I'd love to give you that because I'm a giver and I give you balloon animals. So to me, the sky's the limit. I want my people to engage. But because we don't have the technology yet, we have the technology, we have the gear, but because my techno-idiot, my producer, Wyatt, hasn't figured out how to make it all culminate, so we're going to keep trying it down the road, see if we can find a way to make it happen. Why what? Why do you give me a weird look? Isn't that the professional term for a novice producer?
I don't think any single word half the words you've been using the stream are not professional terms. And that's not even accounting the puns.
All right, well, listen. I'm just trying to keep the people engaged. Mm-hmm. Speaking of engaged, you need a date.
Yes.
Ladies, and if you're out there in webland, internet land, my son is a wonderful man. He's a great drummer. He can play drums. He's a producer. He works at Lowe's. That's the embarrassing part. That's the part you'll have to get over. But he could use a good Christian woman, a woman that loves God first, but that could support him and inspire my son and believe in him so that he could go reach the heights of what his life could offer him. And if you don't come quickly, he'll be stuck being my producer and receiving my insults. Now, for those of you who are brand new and thinking, did he just insult his son? Did he just call his son a techno-idiot? And the answer is yes. And the reason I have access to that, the reason I do that with impunity is because my son issued from my loins. I created him from whole cloth. So that gives me a certain status to allow me to reference him in any way you can. And I taught my son something that nobody else his age is being taught: how to take a stinking joke. Once in a while he'll weep, but we don't get it on camera, and I make sure he mutes his mic.
It's bad for the brand.
And I mute the mic so we don't hear it.
Excuse me, I mute the mic.
See, even in his weeping and his embarrassment and his shame, he handles his production assignments like a pro. And that, my friends, is very, very rare. Trust me. But I did want to say this. When I was at the camp, I got to see a lot of guys, meet a lot of guys, and watch a lot of men who are just trying to get their lives in order, make God first, rule as warriors, and join the militia of the mind. And some of them are here tonight watching the podcast. We had a guy that drove 1,100 miles from Canada to come to this thing. And he might even be on to that. I don't know. I told him if he came on, say hi. We'll say hi to him. But he's a Canadian who, like Danny Herring, is so enraged and so just heartbroken by Trudeau and his lunacy and destruction of his great nation, that I hoped he'd come on so we could pray for him, lay hands on him, even though it would take a miracle of epic proportions to ever right the ship in Canada. But hey, worst case scenario is you guys just become a pawn in the World Economic Forum's desire to control the world by allowing multi-billionaires to have all the yachts and all the caviar, and make the rest of us sacrifice so that they can have more meat and we have less cow farts. That's what's happening by the megalomaniacs who have made me despise multi-billionaires, who I used to admire. Them. They made a lot of money, never was jealous. Good for you. You did it. You figured it out. You taught me I can go do that, and I did. I didn't realize how evil and what money can do. But the Bible says, love of money, root of all evil. Well, we've seen that happening. But one of the things I've noticed is that people oftentimes don't understand how to differentiate between what I say on my podcast as a normal human being, a father, a man, a Christian, a conservative. When you see my clips that brought you here, my comedy, that's a stage persona. Do I believe what I'm saying? Yeah. Do I try to be funny? Yeah. Is it kind of over the top and in your face and aggressive? Yeah, because it's a comedy style that I put on stage to deliver this message. But people sometimes forget that, and they'll comment like I'm actually teaching at a TED Talk, or I'm a pastor in a church, and they'll say, how can he say that? And this guy doesn't know that. And I'm just like, it's a joke! It's comedy, you lunatics! Anyways, I'm going to make a point about that. I'm going to show you a clip of something I did once, and show you where people can get off kilter simply by misunderstanding. Now, there's some humor here, but there's also just some commentary, because that's part of my style, is social commentary, cultural commentary. I'm not political, I'm cultural. What's the culture doing? What's happening? And let's address that. Yes, politics comes in when it comes to how people are treated, what laws are done, what we're allowed to say, not say. That's where politics comes into take their greasy demonic fingers and try to shove it into the flesh so they can control, because they could create nothing. But nevertheless, this is a little clip I did about atheists and their inability to be able to grasp the transcendent. There's some laughs, there's some truth. Watch it, and then we'll come back and I'll comment on it, and then we're going to bring on a very special guest, author Eric Metaxas. But for right now, hey, have a laugh on me. Unless you're in Canada, then get drunk.
Forgot what you were on the script?
What do you mean?
You're sitting there silently. Are we playing the video? What's going on?
Oh, yeah. I thought we were playing the video because I said, let me think how I said it. Here's how I said it.
Okay.
What you're watching is a behind the scenes. See, I thought I had this beautiful segue.
Okay. Well, we didn't choreograph this at all.
Yeah, we didn't, clearly.
I didn't have any cues to look forward to.
Right.
So you want to play the bit?
Well,
I'll play the bit.
yeah, can you, anytime you want to throw that bit out, now that you've ruined the intro, and it was so beautifully seamless, and you've bursted the
If
scene.
you are a Darwinist, and there may be some here today, then you have to accept the conclusion that Darwinism has to give you. What is that? That everything you look at and hold dear is an accident. And even those who you love is just your DNA tricking you into survival. There is no love. Can't exist. Because love isn't molecular. It's just an instinct. It's not even real. Think of that repercussion. The evolutionist, if he was consistent, would have to look at the sunset and say, look at that mass gaseous explosion. Only the theist gets to say, look at the sunset. The atheist gets to say, look at that gigantic mound of minerals and dirt and rocks piled upon itself with crystallized water. Only the theist can say, look at the mountains. Only we get poetry and music. Remember, Darwinism is all about survival. There would never be music if I could find you. Plus, it's hard to run away from a guy chasing you if you're wearing a tuba. You die. It's about survival. Only just survival. Raw instinct. No purpose. No value. No mind before matter. You are worthless and meaningless, and when you die, who cares? That's what you get. I wish evolutionists would simply be consistent. If you really believe it, then allow it to continue. Will you quit throwing these beach whales back in the ocean? They're trying to evolve. That has to be so frustrating for them. They finally make it to the beach. Hey, maybe I can get some hands going here. What are you doing? No. They take this beautiful creation of God Almighty and say it's worthless and meaningless, but yet it exists and it works. Let's deconstruct it and see how it accidentally came to being. I love it when they come up with these other concepts. After millions of years, it evolved camouflage so it could evade its captors after millions of years. What did it do in the meantime? Reason with its cap? Hey, just a twig. Did you hear the concept? After millions of years, it evolved camouflage to evade its predators. If it took millions of years, apparently it didn't need it. That's a good dang track record, if you ask me.
I do need to make a quick comment before we jump right in to my response to that video of me doing comedy. I called my romp in Green Bay the 60-mile, 2.5-hour snow machine romp through the backwoods of Wisconsin. And I called the machine literally a snow machine. I noticed that Nick Kress, or as we like to call him, Saint Nick, decided to jump in and say, no, we call them snowmobiles. Alaska called them snow machines. I had to call Saint Nick out on that because he happened to be absolutely right. A few number of years ago, I did a movie called Christmas with a capital C. I was one of the stars in it. And in that movie, I was going to be a brother of Ted McGinley, who was in Married with Children and Love Boat and Revenge of the Nerds. So you know, he's an actor you've seen. We were brothers, and we would bring people on snowmobile tours. We'd bring them out on boats. They could take pictures. They could fish. They could hunt. That was we were Alaska guys. So snowmobiles were part of the excursions in the script. So I'm reading it, and I'm in Seward, Alaska, gorgeous Seward, Alaska. And I'm talking to some of the locals that they've hired to work on the production, and we get talking about it. He said, yeah, well, I took my snow machine over there and did blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, Snow machine? Why did he call it a snow machine? And then the next day I went out to breakfast, to catering to eat, and a guy said, in my snow machine, and I go, I need to ask you a question. Do you guys call them snow machines in Alaska? And he goes, yeah. I said, oh, because I've always thought it was snowmobile. And he said, oh, yeah, in Alaska we call them snow machines. In the lower 48, they're called snowmobiles. They call those of us down here the lower 48. But in Alaska, they call them snow machines, and I think in Canada too. So Nick was right. So I have to give him props, son. I have to give him props because he caught something, he referenced it, and he gave us some insight to it. So God bless Nick Kress. It's why he's called Saint Nick. And we appreciate him for everything he's done for us. He still lives in Minnesota, so he is not completely coherent. But who are we to judge a saint, son? Maybe when he dies, he'll leave relics, like his frozen bladder. But enough about me. I was telling you guys about this joke. Now, if you look on my YouTube, where the joke is playing on Brad Stine, or if you go to, and by the way, go on Brad Stine Has Issues YouTube and subscribe, please. Follow me on this Facebook, please, and share this so we can grow it. Just throwing it out. I shouldn't have to tell you that, but I do. I have to treat them like children sometimes, son. But here's the deal. One of the ideas that the atheist doesn't seem to be able to grasp, and I have problems with this, so I tried to inculcate into the comedy a transcendent sort of philosophical mind experiment, and it's this. Transcendent is something exists outside of the material world. Now that's thoughts, that's ideas, that's concepts. Love, courage, joy, altruism. These ideas, these concepts are not found in genetics, they're not found in nature. These are ideas that we treasure and find beautiful, even though they don't have a physical manifestation or a chemical response by which we can look in a petri dish and go, there's some love. Oh, that's what kindness looks like. So the idea is that beauty is the realization and the observation of a pleasing aesthetic. Beauty is a thing by which we can look at a mountain range and be in awe. You guys heard me weeks ago talking about how I can't stand the hijacking of the word awesome. It's used by, all the youth leaders. We're going to have pizza night. It's going to be awesome. And I just said, no, awesome's too good of a word. Awesome should be awe-inspiring. It should bring us to awe. Awe opens your mouth, slacks your jaw. Look at that sunset over the ocean in, Guam. I was in Guam, worked a week there performing comedy, and they have some of those beautiful sunsets in the world. I'm sitting on my balcony watching the sunset over the ocean in Guam. That's awesome. But why? Why is watching the sun just simply sort of fade out of view as the earth spins away? Why should that make me feel a sense of beauty? What is beautiful about it? If I held a candle up and then sort of really accidentally just sort of phased it away, would you say, that's beautiful? No, but the sun it creates these gorgeous colors, and the colors, of course, are simply light waves refracting through the atmosphere and creating what we call the color spectrum. But why should color be considered better or worse? A mountain, if you think about it, is simply a gigantic pile of dirt. That's all it is. And rocks, minerals. If I grab some calcium and some sodium and some graphite and I just mixed it up and made a pile, you're not going to go, But if I made a gigantic pile of that, you might think that's big. But when it comes in the form of crags and crevices and trees and mist and snowcap, we look at it as though it's a masterpiece, a painting. And what I say to them in that bit was, you see the beauty like I do. You look at that like I do. Atheist, Christ follower, watching that and going, look at it. Look, the sun is fading out over the ocean and the beautiful colors. Atheist, Christ follower, we're looking at the same thing with the same response that is intrinsic in us. Nobody has to figure out a way to be impressed. It's intrinsic in our nature. We see it and we can't not be inspired by it. The sun is just gaseous explosions of a nuclear reaction within the confines of a star. The colors are just simply, again, refracted light coming through basically pollution and dust in the air and creating different shades of observance. But we see it as more than that. Nobody made us, nobody taught us to do that. We can't not do it. It is a clue, it is a proof, it is evidence of God. There is no reason to look at a pile of dirt and be in awe, but you do. Why? There's no survival purpose to looking at a mountain and going, it's amazing. Matter of fact, it should have you in agony. Oh, it's going to be hard to climb. When I get to the top, I'll run out of oxygen, I'll die. I'll freeze to death, I'll die. The animals are too difficult to get. I'd rather kill the ones down here. There's no survival value to it, and yet we find it beautiful and awe-inspiring, and we want to conquer it and participate in it and put our human being into this material, but see it as something grander than ourselves. It's a proof of God. God's here. He gives us things. He made the universe beyond our imagination big. It's so big we can't imagine it. So God can say, look how big I am, evidence of what I've done. He can also shrink himself down into the very small blossom of a flower or a baby or an arm around your shoulder during grief, saying, I'll walk with you. The evidence of God is literally everywhere you look, every moment of the day. You breathe, you don't make yourself breathe, it's natural. Your heart pumps, you don't make it do that, it's natural. Your blood, if you are cut, will automatically seal up that cut. That's a miracle. What a miracle machine. Every time you work your body, use your eyes that can instantly adjust and focus more than the most expensive camera you can find. It's a miracle. It's a proof of God. The atheist literally sees the proofs and he admits it. I'm awe-inspired. And then they'll say, but it's just nature. We don't need God. I can just love it for itself. You can't. It's just dirt. There's nothing beautiful there. You have to try to give it meaning because you have none. You don't believe in such a thing as a purpose or something grander than yourself. You don't think people are better than anything else. You think you're just made of the same carbon and materials as that mountain. You shouldn't be impressed in it. And if you're impressed by the beauty of that mountain, you should be impressed by looking at a human and being in awe. We don't. There's something bigger about things that are bigger. There's something more majestic about things that are majestic. And then there's something more deeply moving about something that is smaller but yet has its own amazing, one-of-a-kind accomplishment that humans have. We look at the mountain in the awe. The mountain never looks back. We see the sun respond as it goes down. We see the beauty. We receive the beauty. It moves us and touches us. The sun will never know we're here. It doesn't have a mind. We do. Animals have minds, but they don't contemplate the sunrise and the sunset. They don't give a crap. They don't look at the mountains and think of them as beautiful. They use them as simply a place to go hide, to eat. They don't have what a human has, this unique experience of coming outside of the material world and seeing it as something grander than just the material it is. See the soul in the mountain, the beauty of the sky and the gorgeousness of the flower and the baby's laugh, right? That is God's proof. No atheist will ever stand before God and say, you didn't give me enough proof. Because first off, no atheist will stand before God. No Christian will stand before God. We'll be on our face, trust me. You are about to enter and be in the presence of the single greatest being that can be imagined, who spoke a breath and made all this material simply come into existence from nothingness. You will be in awe. You won't argue with him. You won't contemplate why he didn't give you enough evidence. You will be on your face in the abject horror, if you're not a Christ follower, of realizing when Stine kept telling me on his stupid podcast with his balloon animals and his son, who can barely push a button, that God is real and he loves you, and that part of the beauty that I see around me was actually there for God to remind me this is me making this stuff. And I chose to disregard it and say, nah, it just happened by accident. The foolishness, the buffoonery, the lack of logic, reason, and science of that stupid belief system. There's nothing more cowardly and foolish than to be an atheist. It's absurd because it literally claims it has no intrinsic value and then looks around and tries to give value to everything it sees instead of accepting the value that was given to you as a gift. I am God, come know me so you can come home. That's how this works. So that little comedy routine was trying to find the funny, but also to expose to the atheist. I'm not here to mock or ridicule you. I'm here to let you know that you have chosen a very foolish, illogical path. And I want you to find the path the rest of us have found. We make mistakes. We are hypocrites. We do things wrong. We sin. We're terrible. That's exactly another proof that God is real, because he forgives us for all that stuff because he knew we can never earn this. We're too crappy at this. Let me die for you so I can see you through the prism of my son's blood. That is another clue of God. You know you're not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. You think you can somehow make yourself perfect, but you can't. Christianity admits we can't make ourselves perfect and is grateful that God did the heavy lifting for us. You see, this country was built on the Judeo-Christian ethic that there is in fact a God, that people are intrinsically sinners, so we need to create checks and balances in the government because people in power will try to destroy everybody else. It's happening right now on this earth by people who are rich and thus can buy and sell those of us who don't have that kind of money. And they think they're doing well because they've gotten so filthy rich they couldn't spend the money if they wanted to. They think it gives them a special seat at the table of human interaction. Literally, where they can say some of the population needs to die so we can survive. And again, Bill Gates will never volunteer. He's too good to volunteer to die. He's too important. The rest of us he doesn't care about. But boy, does he need to live, because he invented a computer. If you're an atheist and you don't believe Jesus is God, you're going to hell, and you're never getting out, ever, eternally. And if you think that's too much to ask, what kind of God would do that? Let me make something very clear. You don't have to go. If you're watching me right now, just simply say, oh, yeah, I am a sinner. Yep, I make mistakes. And just go find this God and say, all right, Jesus, if you're the one, I accept your gift so I can be free. And then you need to start a journey to get to know him. You read your Bible. You find a church that actually teaches the Bible and not a woke, progressive, heretical, idiot church, a destructive, cancerous church that uses Christ's name and has no right to it. They're the ones that literally the Bible spoke of will come and say, I did a lot of things in your name, and he said you had no rights to it. You're going to hell. These are people in church, by the way, and they're loving people right into hell. If you're progressive and you're a woke church, you are a heretic. And demons have taken over your theology, and you're killing people, and you're going down too. Twice as hard if you're a teacher. God says he doubly judges teachers. So I just am giving you an opportunity. If you're listening right now, just simply say, all right, God, I accept this. I don't want to go to hell. I want to know Jesus. I accept your blood in your sacrifice. You do that, You've started the process. That's all he asks. Humble yourself. You can do it. If you're watching me right now and you choose not to, this moment will be replayed when you enter into eternity, and you're going to soon. We all are going to die soon. You'll remember this moment. You said, I don't believe this. I'm really here. I'm really stuck. I can't get out. I can't change my mind. That comic told me. I heard it. I said I don't want it. And now here I am. No way out. Don't do that. Don't be stupid. Humble yourself. Accept Christ. And join the family of all these crazy people that keep showing up every dang week to laugh, to think, and to hopefully find a way to keep America alive so we can be free for another day. I don't know if we're going to make it, but if you want to be part of the militia of the mind, hang on. We're going to have more and more guests. We're going to get t-shirts. And most importantly, guys, we're going to start preparing ourselves to do some battle. I want you to ask yourself, and I'm going to start asking that on Mondays, what did you do this week to fight in the militia of the mind? What political correct nonsense did you stand up against, even if you had to do it alone? What risk did you take this day to say you will not cause me to lie to you over something that you are demanding I succumb to? What did you do to gather groups of people and signatures to get Marxist ideology ripped out of schools and thrown back into the pit of hell where it belongs? What have you done, militia of the mind? Because if you're waiting for Republicans or Democrats to save you, you're doomed. But if the people rise up and be the government as the Constitution had said we are and the Declaration said we are, we can win. If we rise up against this entrenched swamp of Congress and the executive branch and the judiciary, who thinks they rule us instead of represent us. Most of them are corrupt and are owned, many by China. This is real. You better get on board. Militia of the mind, prepare for battle. The guy that I'm about to bring on, and you're going to watch this interview with, Eric Metaxas, it's going to blow in your mind. He wrote many books. Bonhoeffer, he wrote one on William Wilberforce, 7 Men, 7 Women, Miracles, lots of great books, but this latest one is called Letters to the American Church, and he's kind of letting us know what is necessary for an actual church to actually serve Christ and what can possibly be done to save this nation before it's too late. He is a very well-known, respected New York Times best-selling author, and I'm privileged to call him a friend. Hang on, watch this interview, interact, and start getting prepared, folks. I told you this is not going to be just a podcast. This is going to be marching orders, and we're going to be proactive Americans, Christians, conservatives, patriots, and we will fight back. We may not win, but I can tell you this, God wins every time. Find him first, find his marching orders, and then prepare to defend the territory you've been given. Wyatt, I don't think I can keep them one more second from an interview that I promise you is going to be sobering and scary, but hopefully inspiring. And afterwards, I'll come back and wrap her up. Guys, I give you my friend, Eric Metaxas.
You know, it's not always that I get to interview somebody that's famous, that's attractive, that's important, that has all kinds of weight and gravitas, and he actually is a friend of mine. And then I came to find out that he didn't just agree to be on my podcast, but in fact, he was court-ordered. So under those circumstances, I am going to try to take advantage of this man as much as I possibly can, always have. But most importantly, he is a good man, a patriot, an American, a conservative, a Christ follower, every possible thing that I need to check off to make sure that he's somebody fighting in the court that is most important right now, the kingdom of God. So I want to welcome, for your viewing pleasure, what a coup today, Mr. Writer, podcaster, and own television show, because he's so important, Eric Metaxas.
Thank you.
How do you do, Eric?
Thank you. You've been a great audience. You've been a great audience. By the way, I just want to make clear up front, I'm just doing this to fulfill a legal obligation, paying my debt to society. My heart is not in it. Let's just start there.
Listen, trust me when I say you're in a long line of felons that needed to get doing my interview with an ankle bracelet. So, anyways,
I just can't believe a judge would do a thing like this to me. This is comes very close to cruel and unusual punishment. But you know what? The lawyer I have, this is the best deal he could get me, and I'm going to go with it, Brad. Okay, I'm going to get through it.
Listen, when you use a public, counsel, unfortunately, you get the dredges. But speaking of public counsel and the dredges, let's get right to it. You are a very, very busy guy, and I do thank you. You are my friend, and I appreciate you taking time to be on my little podcast because we have so much we need to discuss and so much that matters. And that's the one thing I love about you, Eric. You're courageous. And if there is any missing component to the DNA of Americans, it's courage. I think the Corona cult exposed more of the cowardice and the fear and the lack of loving liberty than anything I've ever seen in my lifetime. So let's just start right there, my friend.
You know what? I don't normally do this, but I grabbed my Bible, which I have a Bible right here, which I don't normally grab or use.
So using the Bible at this point is an anomaly.
And well, normally when I'm doing a podcast or something like that, I wouldn't do this. But what you just said about courage, people act like certain things are extra credit, right? Like being courageous is extra credit Christianity or something like that. Here's the issue. If you believe the Bible is the word of God, which a lot of people do, or they claim to, then, you've got a little problem with the courage issue because it talks about, if I can find it right here, it says, those who will be cast into the lake of fire. This is in Revelation. It's either 21 or 22. Here it is. Revelation 21. This is like the last page and a half of the Bible. Revelation 21, it says, but the cowardly, unbelieving, abominable, murderers, sexually immoral, sorcerers, idolaters, and all liars. But it starts out with the cowardly. Shall have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. There is nothing more chilling than that to me. And so I say up front that to be courageous is not optional and it's not extra credit. God calls us to be courageous. And if the Lord calls us to be courageous, we know there's nothing except greatness in following what he calls us and commands us to do. He commands us to love him and to be courageous. And I think, Brad, this is why I love you, because we share a passion to communicate truth to people. But it's also, you're also communicating the love of God to people. When you're saying to people, listen, the Lord calls us to be courageous, and he tells us he's equipped us. He's given us everything we need. We have no excuse. He's given us everything we need, and he'll be with us, and it's beautiful. There is no downside to it. So when people say, I'm courageous, I think, well, I'm glad I may seem courageous in some sense to some people, but I want to do it to inspire others to be similarly courageous, because God commands us to be courageous. This is not, something we can just think about. We have to really, it's called living out our faith, which of course we're going to talk about my book, Letter to the American Church. But the whole point of the book is we have to live out our faith, not just talk about it, not just believe it in our head. And I was going to title Letter to the American Church, Faith Without Works is Dead, which is, of course, another scripture. If you don't live it out, then you don't really believe it. And that's a really chilling thing. When people say it's by faith alone, it's like, okay, do you have faith? If you're not living it out, the Lord says you don't have faith. So it's become a particular passion of mine.
Well, clearly, and you've taken a lot of heat for that. But, one of the things that I've noticed, and one of the things that makes you so important in this narrative in America right now as a believer, as a Christian, other than just being a man of God and being courageous, that's boy, if we just had plenty of those guys, like you said, that would be, that'd be enough. But you wrote a book that is so poignant, and it was probably 10 years ago, maybe, that you and I were in New York, and I think Bonhoeffer had just come out, or shortly thereafter, and you and I was going to work at Fox and Friends or do something, and so we were together, and we ended up in my hotel room, and I interviewed you by my phone, and we talked a little bit about, do you see things happening in America that you clearly were doing such research on during the Bonhoeffer book about German citizens at the time that were in Germany that were watching something dismantle in front of them that they probably didn't see coming, and by the time it got there, boy, they had a choice to make, and it wasn't it wasn't a simple choice. It was going to be costly. And I said, do you see any parallels? Now, this is 10 years ago. And you said, oh, yeah. No, this is pretty much the same thing that's happened. Well, we're 10 years in. Yeah. Little did we know where this was going. So I want to say something about proactivity. This is important. Because one of the things I said when I started this podcast, I said, I do not want to be a podcast that sits around saying, I'm a Christian conservatives. Aren't we the best? And everybody goes, yay, we sure are. And then we said, can you imagine if a Republican had said that? Oh, you're right. They're such hypocrites. It's like, we haven't done anything. I don't give a crap. Clearly, we have been censored. The Twitter files are now proving all this to be true. We've been censored. We have been maligned. We've been blackballed. We've been blacklisted. We have been shadow banned. We have technocrats that have got with bureaucracies, that have gotten with our government system, with the number one agency, police agency in the country, the FBI, is now against American citizenry. I can't write a book that is more defining fascism.
It's hard.
Than this.
Listen, it's hard to fathom. I mean, let's be honest. This is why a lot of people refuse to wake up or refuse to look at it, because it's a little painful to admit that things could be this bad. Maybe it's happening to somebody else. It's happening to some jerk, to some bad person who they should have kept their head down, and they're loud mouths, and they talk too much, and they should have been home that day. They shouldn't have been, And you think, well, yeah, except that's not true. What's true is you just mentioned the FBI. On my program, I'll plug my program. It's called the Eric Metaxas Show, and you can listen to it on podcast or on the radio, or you go to my website and find it. But what I say to everybody, and I'll mention this at the end, my website is just my name, ericmetaxas.com. And if you sign up for the newsletter at ericmetaxas.com, we'll send you all the interviews that I do. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that just the other day, I interviewed Roger Stone. Now, Roger Stone, fascinating story. And his interview, again, it's on Rumble, the Eric Metaxas Show. But this is a guy who I can just, to sum up, did nothing wrong. And not only did the FBI come after him, I mean, just try to think about this. This sounds like I'm making this up. I know Roger Stone, okay? He lives with his wife. They were at that time living in a place in Florida that backed onto like a canal, because they've got that, in Florida, they got these canals where you keep your boats or whatever it was. 29 FBI agents came at 6 a.m. Now, think about 29 FBI agents with all the gear and the rifles, 17 vehicles, 17, not 10, not 4, 17 vehicles, 29 agents. They had frogmen in the canal behind his house. Now, if you know Roger Stone, this is the kind of guy, if somebody calls up his lawyer and says, we need Roger to appear, would he be like, okay, and he'll be there. This is to intimidate. Now, the more I hear stories of like this from people who are my friends or who are becoming my friends, the more I am just outraged, astonished, and moved to action. And the reason I wrote Letter to the American Church is to say to people, listen, we need to act. We can't sit on our hands and say, well, I'll pray, or I'm going to keep my nose clean. We have to understand it's no different than, when you say, when you've done this to the least of my brethren, you've done it unto me. We're supposed to care. We're supposed to be our brother's keepers. And what's happening in America to a few good people like Roger Stone and to all kinds of people who were there on January 6th and to tons of people I could mention, I'm just here to tell you it's wrong, it's sick, But if the church will speak up, if people who claim to be Christians, now there are all kinds of good patriots who don't believe in Jesus, they're already speaking up. I'm talking only to the church. In this book, Letter to the American Church, it's aimed at the church to say, listen, church, what happened in Germany in the 30s, the parallels are astonishing. I'm not making it up. I wrote the book, 600 pages, astonishing parallels. The new book is my shortest book ever. It's like 150 pages. But the point is, I look at where we are today, and you were saying it, Brad, when we were talking years ago, I could sort of see this coming, but I never dreamt that the COVID stuff, the Biden administration, it's on steroids, it's insanity, and the only sense I can make of it is that this is God's mercy to wake up those who might still be awakened. Because in Germany, Bonhoeffer was trying to wake up the church and saying, listen, we can fight this if we're united against it. But many said, no, we just want to keep our noses clean. We don't want to get involved in politics. So the church mostly sat back. And by the time they saw what they had allowed to happen, it was too late. So the reason I wrote Letter to the American Church is to wake up those, especially Christian leaders, pastors, who might be open-minded, who might look around and say, the madness that's happening is so crazy, maybe it's time for me to wake up. I really believe, I'm hopeful that many in the church, because of the horrors that are happening, that there are many who are beginning to wake up, and they're going to be the holy remnant that God is preparing for this season.
Oh, for sure. Well, what was interesting when it first hit, and I've told people this, it's not a secret, but from kind of day one when they said, wear a mask, blah, 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 I didn't. I just said something is wrong. Something in my spirit said something doesn't make sense. I've never been told I had to wear something. I've never been told I couldn't go to work. I've never been told I'm not allowed to associate with others. I've never saw America built on the backs of people who were literally willing to risk their lives for liberty because they knew what was more important than the world that they had left behind. And this ethic, this puritanical work ethic, this idea that there's something grander than ourselves, including the idea of the transcendent, of something beautiful, something worth fighting for and dying for, made America. That's not the DNA of us anymore. And when they came to pastors in churches and they said, close her down, and they used the term, you are unessential. I said, if I was a pastor, not only would I have opened my doors, I would have ripped them off the hinges.
Okay, and this is, again, why I love you, Brad Stine. Let me say to your audience that I have been invited to those churches that have been heroic. They're all over the country, but there are many pastors and Christian leaders who have been totally heroic and have said what you just said. They basically said, listen, I claim to believe that Jesus died on the cross and defeated death, so I have no fear. I'm going to do what I know is right by God's grace. Those churches, by the way, that have been unafraid in that way, their numbers have exploded.
Yeah.
Giving has doubled and tripled.
Yeah.
All the churches that have said, well, we are just going to go along with the government. We don't want to stick our necks out. We're just going to go along. They kind of pretended as though that's what Jesus would do, which is not correct. Those churches are struggling to stay open.
Yeah.
So I'm here to affirm you in what you said, because there are heroes all around this country, and they've invited me, many of them, to speak from their pulpits. And the churches that are not so heroic, they're not inviting me because they've bought this lie that we can't be political. And in the book, Letter to the American Church, I basically say that's not biblical. If you're against slavery, there were many people who said, oh, that's political. You can't have an opinion on that. Just preach your little gospel. If you were against the Nazis and you spoke up in the 30s in a German church, they said, oh, that's political. How dare you be political? The fact of the matter is that is a big theme of the book, that we bought this lie in America, and we have self-silenced ourselves. We have not, we talk about in China, you can't say anything incendiary, anything political, anything with ramifications that might threaten the state. They will crush you. Well, in this country, we have the freedom to say anything we like, and we have censored ourselves. And so it's just a big mission for me to tell people that that's not biblical. And by the way, people who followed that bad idea in Germany opened the door to pure hell on earth when the Nazis took power. And what I'm saying, Brad, actually is that right now what I see happening in the American church, because of the silence in American churches, in many American churches, and the failure of courage, we are opening the door to judgment and to hell on earth in exactly the way the Germans did. And I wrote the book because I believe it's not God's will that we repeat that, but we are now repeating that. We need to repent, and that's why I wrote the book.
Well, yes, and Jack Hibbs, Rob McCoy, John MacArthur. I'm trying to think of some of the other.
Jay On. When I was in I mean, they're all around the country. I was in Leesburg, Virginia. There's a church called Cornerstone Chapel, Gary Hamrick.
Yes.
I was in Englewood, Colorado. There's a church called Brave Church. Interesting. It has the title Brave Church.
Yeah.
They are like that. They're churches around the country.
Yes.
And they are, not only have they been totally heroic on all this stuff, but God has blessed them by doubling and tripling and sometimes more their numbers. And I think how interesting it proves there is a hunger out there. There are many people who wouldn't have even said I'm a Christian who are attracted to that kind of fire, that kind of truth-telling, that kind of courage in the face of this madness.
I know.
So
well,
I really believe
I
this
don't
is
want to
part of the revival that's happening in America right now.
I don't want to forget Rick Long in Arvada, Colorado. He when I went to do with him, he said at that point he was up to $700,000 in fines from the state and the city, and his lawyer said, "Don't worry, you're never going to pay a dime," and he hasn't. And also Darren Tyler at Conduit Church in Franklin, Tennessee, they opened up 2020 of June. That's, you know what, Eric, literally when people come to bring me into their church nowadays, the only question I ask them is, what did you do for COVID? That tells me who they are. It exposes it all. And
Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? You know what? You just mentioned two names, which I haven't heard of. Mention them again because I'm fascinated.
Rick Long in Arvada, Colorado, has got a big giant church there. I've been going there for years. And his church, like I said, they got fined $700,000 in fines because he wouldn't shut down. And his lawyer said, "You're never going to pay," and he hasn't. And then Darren Tyler is at Conduit Church in Franklin. He's my church, my pastor. He never shut down. His people. We do so much work overseas with this church. We literally buy people out of brick kiln slaves, their families who have debt that they can't get out of. So they're literally slaves today. We buy them out of their slavery and so forth. So they're very much proactive about what's happening overseas and the deaths and destruction that was happening to people overseas because of these COVID measures, because it's not one-stop shop, man. What if I tell a Westerner in the United States you can't go to the store today or this or that? You can eat, you think, but these other folks, they went, it's like, no. This is life or death. And so they did the research, said something's wrong here, but we're not shutting down. And of course, the other pastors don't want to hear it because they don't have any balls. They're being exposed, and suddenly they don't like to be seen as cowards. It's more fun to stand on a pulpit, use the platitudes, find all of the fiery sermons and all the powerful stories in the Bible, read them like metaphors, not like they were real, read about the Civil War, read about the Revolutionary War, read about Nazi Germany, as though it was a myth to enlighten us and to inspire us, instead of real people who said we need to do something because this is not of God. People don't believe Jesus is God in America, or they would act like he was, and they would believe there's some way to move forward. That's just what is happening. And so all you churches that you shut her down because you were a good citizen and Jesus would have taken the vax and you suddenly went out of business, it's because you were weeded out. You were weeded out. You get to go hang with the chaff and the goats and enjoy yourself. But the rest of us have a battle to attend. And if you want to repent, we'll bring you back in the fold. We don't want to. But then again, God has forgiven me when I don't deserve it. But this is where we're at. Now, let me ask you this, Eric, because again, this is your expertise because you wrote the definitive Bonhoeffer biography. So it's just a perfect segue because this was a real-time scenario with real people that endured the consequences of the non-action. But let me ask you this. So suddenly I'm a German citizen, it's 1939, something's going on, this guy's coming in, he's telling me that we're gonna revive Germany again, we're gonna make our, the money worth money again, we're gonna remove the shame of World War I and all of the sanctions that happened to us, and we're gonna revive it, and everybody felt good about being a German, and suddenly Hitler's getting in there, and suddenly Kristallnacht happens, and what's going on? And next thing they know, people are being put into boxcars and shipped off to some place. And we all sit here now in 2022 and go, man, they had to know what was going on. Why didn't they do something? Okay, Eric, let's pretend that the majority of citizens in Germany felt that they had been duped. This is a totalitarian, and we need to do something to help these poor German Jews. So let's be realistic. What could they have done?
Yeah. Well,
different?
First of all, before I answer that question, we were mentioning all these pastors, and I forgot to mention Pastor Mike McClure, San Jose, California. That's another one. You want to talk about heroic. Went through hell, because that's San Francisco County, whatever. They put him through hell, fined him zillions of dollars. Eventually they won. But that's another one, and they're out there around this country, and I praise God for every one of them.
Amen.
I brought a copy of my book to show the class. It's Letter to the American Church.
Well, we'll have a link up too, so that they can buy. Is it on Amazon mainly?
It's how it's, of course, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But the reason I wrote this book is really to answer the question you just asked, to make it clear to people that. Because I think there's some people that would say, well, what could the church have done in the 30s? And I'm here to tell you the parallels are extremely dramatic. And again, a lot of us have mythologized the past. So you kind of think of Nazi Germany, that's a loony world. That's like talking about Pharaoh. I don't know. What does that have to do with me? It is dramatically similar. It was a very, very sophisticated culture. My mom, who I talk to every day, grew up in that culture. This is not like another universe. This was, in many ways, very similar to the United States today. In one way that it was similar was the power of the church. The German church was a powerful institution in Germany. This was not, we're not talking about, North Korea or China or whatever. The German church was central in the culture, okay? Germany gave us Luther. Obviously, I wrote a book about Martin Luther. You see a culture that is just informed by its Lutheranism and so on and so forth. So when Bonhoeffer said to the churches, now he wasn't the only one, but to say we need to stand up, number one, it needs to be said that if the German churches had stood up and had vocally and forcefully pushed back against what the Nazis were trying to do, which they could have done for a number of years before it was too late, there is no doubt that they could have prevailed, because we sort of don't really understand the history. Hitler did not have total power, okay? This was not a Saddam Hussein or a Kim Jong-un. He became that, sort of, but he never had that kind of power. He still had to work within a kind of legal structure. There were judges. There were checks and balances to some extent, but the largest check and balance, the largest check and balance to the Nazis and to the government was the church. The German church had tremendous cultural power, had a huge voice in Germany. So Bonhoeffer and others who were part of the confessing church knew that if the church gets this and understands, first of all, the satanic nature, or at least the anti-biblical, anti-Christian nature of the Nazis, and gets it and pushes back, well, probably they would prevail. But many people at the time said exactly what American Christian leaders are saying today. What did they say? They said, Romans 13, we're not political. We don't do politics. We don't do that. We're supposed to bow to the authority of the state. Now, that's not exactly what Romans 13 says, and it is also not biblical, okay? When you have the power to push back, what happens if Christians are active? You and I know what happens. Good things happen. People are blessed. Strangers are blessed. Pagans are blessed. Atheists are blessed. Muslims are blessed. Everyone in the culture will be blessed if Christians are politically active. When Christians got politically active and led the battle against the slave trade, did it just bless Christians? Was it just culture warring so Christians could get more power, as a lot on the left in the church are saying today? No, it was blessing strangers from Africa who had been enslaved. So the lie that we're supposed to just stay in our lane and don't be political, that's a lie from the pit of hell. It's designed to silence the church. And when you silence the church, you're trying to silence the voice of God, because it is the voice of God through his church that says slavery is evil, whatever is evil, to point these things out, because God wants his people to be salt and light, to bless everyone in the culture. So when forces on the left, the secular forces, say, shut up, we don't want to hear what you have to say, either you're non-essential or, you know, you're being political, you're being a culture warrior, which is what Russell Moore wrote in Christianity Today some months ago. It's, in other words, a lot of these folks on the left, I guess they hate Trump so much that they have kind of created this bizarre theology. It's very similar to the theology of some in the German church that opened the door to Hitler. They really felt like it's just not biblical for me to engage. Now, I'm here to say, A, that's not true. B, we saw what happened in Germany to those Christian leaders who believed that lie. They opened the door to hell on earth. And I'm here to say that is exactly what is happening today. When you are silent in the face of evil, you know, because you say, well, what could they have done? We don't have time to talk about the innumerable things they could have done. The first thing I will say, just to keep it simple, and of course I write about this in the book Letter to the American Church. As soon as the Nazis took power, what they did, now this is similar but different from where we are today, but they basically said, we, the government, want to co-opt the church. When you know, co-opt the church means destroy the church, defang and declaw the church, make the church bow to us, we are the state, right? Now, if you're Christian, you understand, no, the church is the church. The church bows to Jesus. The church doesn't bow to the state. But in many cultures, they never had to make a choice. In Germany, they never had to have a choice. The Kaiser had always been very pro-church and very church-friendly and had never challenged the church. Suddenly, they have Adolf Hitler, whose values are antithetical to the church. So they had a moment in the early 30s where they had to make a decision. They had to say, well, wait a minute, we've never had this happen before. What's going on? Bonhoeffer, very quickly, being a brilliant theologian, was able to unpack this for those in, I think it was called the Emergency Church League, to sort of help them understand, here's where we are now, here's what we have to do. So eventually they draft this thing called the Barmen Declaration, which was a declaration saying, we will not be a state church. We will not be a Nazified church. We are the Church of Jesus Christ, and we reserve the right to be totally independent. We answer to God. Now, there's a chapter in my book, Letter to the American Church, called 12,000 Pastors. Why? Because there were 18,000 pastors in Germany at this time, Protestant pastors, 3,000 who signed the Barmen Declaration. There were more that signed it, but by 1935, as two years into the Nazi regime, there were only about 3,000 of that 18,000 who were really, really standing strong and brave and heroic. On the other end of the spectrum, out of that 18,000, there was another 3,000 that were 100% all in for Hitler. So they were aggressively against the confessing church, those who were standing strongly for the Church of Jesus Christ. But here's the key, Brad. In the middle, there were 12,000 Protestant pastors who sort of refused to take sides. They said, you know what, we're going to play it safe. We're going to see which way the wind blows. We don't want to be political. We're going to sit this one out. We'll let the 3,000 over here take all the heat. We'll let them go to prison. We'll let them get dragged down to Gestapo headquarters. We'll let them be persecuted. We are going to just sit back, and we're not going to be political. We're not going to take a stand. In fact, we advocate, you know, just be nice and preach your little gospel in your little church on Sunday and don't get political. And the point of my book and the point of the chapter, 12,000 Pastors, is that it was those 12,000 in the middle who determined what happened in Germany. If a few thousand of those 12,000 had been heroic and stood with the 3,000, there's no question that the Barmen Declaration would have been held up, the church would have remained free and independent. They could have done it, but they were, Bonhoeffer at one point, and again, I quote everything in the book, Letter to the American Church, but at one point he says, he was always very gracious, but he said something that how fed up he was with these theologically based restraints, which were in fact bad theology, but he says, which were in fact nothing but fear. In other words, it was fear. They said, we don't want to get in trouble. We don't want to get shut down. We don't want somebody to fine us or take us to court, or we don't want to. So we're just going to comply. By the time things got really, really, really bad, it was too late. And I want to say one other thing before I forget. I wrote Letter to the American Church in a sense to reach those who could still be reached, because in Germany in the 30s, there were good guys that got this wrong. In other words, they weren't all total cowards and selfish pigs who didn't care about other people. There were some good guys that they got the wrong narrative, and they were afraid just enough, and then finally they understood, and it was too late. One of them was Martin Niemöller, and I write about him. When he finally understood what he had enabled, he was one of the most heroic voices against it. But by that time, it was too late. And so I say this specifically because there are Christian leaders out there and pastors out there who are this minute going along with this narrative, who I believe can be reached. Yeah. And so I say to people, if you're going to a church where the pastor doesn't get it, give them a copy of the book, because it is not, it's not an angry book. It is in other words, I'm trying to reason lovingly with my brothers in Christ who don't understand what the parallels are and what is happening, because I actually believe they can be reached. And just to show you how bad things are in the American church, there was a book that came out. It was right around when I submitted this manuscript to the publisher. I get a book in the mail from Zondervan. You probably know this. And, you know, they think of me as an influencer, so they send me a book. What's the book? Well, it's by Pastor Andy Stanley in Atlanta. And I look at it, and I forced myself to read the whole book, and it was very painful. It's an extremely short book. It's like half the size of mine. It's like a pamphlet, but cost about $22. And his argument in the book is precisely the opposite of what I say in my book. In other words, he twists scriptures. I don't believe he does it intentionally. I just believe he's confused. But he basically makes it sound like the scriptures say we shouldn't fight, we shouldn't take sides on these hot button issues, we shouldn't be political, we shouldn't be culture warriors, we shouldn't whatever it is, you know. Which of course it's kind of like saying, well, okay, what if slavery is on the ballot? Are you supposed to speak out against slavery? Are you supposed to speak out against Nazis demonizing Jews? Where do you draw the boundaries? But these people, they don't think it through. They just go, we're not supposed to be political. So I read the book, and then he says something about how in the first century the church was not political, and you know. And I thought, the first century, there are people who died so that we could be self-governing in America. We're not in the first century. We are not under Caesar. We are the government. We, the people, are supposed to fight to have freedom and representation and to advocate for what is good. So anyway, the book is a mess. And it disturbed me because I thought it's going to delude all kinds of people. Now, I have no clue of Andy Stanley's heart. I don't know him. But here, where it got really bad was when I went on the Amazon page for the book, and I saw a gigantic blurb, positive, from Jim Daly of Focus on the Family. And I said, that's how I know how bad things are, because Jim Daly's a good guy. He's a good man. I've known him for years. But he has been persuaded, this is kind of the siren song, that we shouldn't be political. Let's just preach the gospel. And I wrote this book hoping that folks like Jim Daly and others would understand that they have been riding on the back of a tiger. They think everything's fine. But let me tell you something, that tiger's going to eat you and eat everybody, and you need to be aware of what is happening. And so I say this because I know there are good people who have been going along with this, who can be reached. If we reach them, I have hope for the American church. If we don't reach them, if we don't fight with all we have to explain these things now, there's going to come a time when it's too late. Yeah. And we are already under judgment. We're already going in a direction where if you look around, you have eyes to see, you say, this is insanity.
Yeah.
Things are breaking down at a level that I never dreamt could happen. I believe it's God's mercy to wake up those who could still be wakened.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I mean, wouldn't that be just like God? Because, you know, we don't deserve it. But by the same token, the people that are most in angst, the believers that are most troubled and most sort of introspective about, man, am I failing? Am I not being a warrior for Christ? We're not the problem. We're trying to do something. You know, those of us who see there's a bigger picture here, we're already in the game. We're not always sure how to go about it. You know, my career as a comic, and you know, when the New Yorker called me God's comic, you know, as a left-handed compliment, and I just took it and said, I'm going to run with this. But one of the things that once in a while the church would say, yeah, we love you, but yeah, you're political. And I'd always say, well, define your terms, because if you say political means I'm coming in and trying to do a Trump rally, I'm not. If you're saying come in and vote Republican, you're not a believer, don't do that. Matter of fact, nothing has been more clear to me than the cowardice and the traitorous actions or inactions of Republicans.
Exactly.
They are an absolute disgrace to this nation. I know the demons I'm fighting with the Democrats. I know who they are. They don't care. This is what we fight. We don't care if we lie. We don't care if we get caught, because nothing happens. We can steal an election in Arizona, and we run the election board, and we are not going to allow you to even question it. And where are the stinking Republicans saying, oh, no, 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 no. We will shut down this state until this election fraud is exposed and people go to stinking jail. Well, nobody does go to jail. Eric, if there is no consequences to my sin, I'm going to sin. I win. And this is where we're at. So I tell the churches, and a lot do like me, but they realize I'm dangerous. But I say to them, political, as far as a political party or whatever, fear not. I will not have you vote for it. That's not what I'm there for, because Jesus loves us all. But if it's about the culture, if it's about the behaviors, if it's about the sin, the morality, the truth or the lack thereof in the culture, I have to speak those things. That's what Christianity talks about. It redeems the lies, because our fight is truth and lies. It manifests in political parties. It manifests in ideologies. It manifests in world economic forums. Clearly, we are not a republic. We're not. It's over. We don't vote anymore. They steal our votes. We're not run by President Biden. He's run by who knows, but it's some self-appointed elites in some place in certain, I don't know, Europe, that's running the show. And so here we sit, and I'm just a stinking comic, and I have to be the one that figures this out.
You don't want to lead people to be cynical. In other words, what I want to say to people is, these things are true, but I genuinely believe that by God's grace, if we fight, we can win. If we fight, but we have to fight, and we have to understand that if you don't fight, if you don't pray, if you don't do what you can, if you're silent in the face of evil, you are part of the problem. And I want people to think about that.
Well, and I don't mean to say when I get off on my rants that I've given up. But it's righteous indignation, I hope.
Of course. Well, of course it is. But all I'm trying to say is that I want to say to people that as bad as things are, I actually believe, and I won't go into the details, but I believe that there are enough people who can be awakened to join the fight, that they're waking up right now. There are people waking. I mean, listen, so many people have told me, I've given your book, Letter to the American Church, to my pastor, right? If 10% of those pastors take it to heart and begin speaking, just changing a little bit, understanding, you know what, I've been guilty. I've been part of the silence. If that happens, Brad, I'm telling you, it doesn't take everybody. It takes just enough people who get it. And I really believe there are good guys out there who have got it wrong. They've been going along with the narrative, but they're beginning to wake up. They're looking around. I also believe that we're going to see revival, because when things get this bad, your average person out there who doesn't have Jesus in their life, they're looking around thinking, what is happening? This is so crazy. I don't see a way out. You know, people who got the vaccine and now they've got kind of issues from the vaccine. People who are just looking around at what's going on in schools and in the media. they know something's wrong, and I believe they're looking in their way toward God. They're saying, is there a God out there, or is there anybody out there who can give me hope? Is the world crazy? Is there any reality? I mean, when you see Biden he has been an apologist for the transgender lunacy. This is, and when people say, well, I didn't vote, or Biden's a nice guy and Trump's mean, do you understand? You have opened the door to evil just on that issue. Biden has had people appointed in his administration who are just deeply sick people who are advocates for the most bizarre sexuality and stuff that you can't even imagine. He has opened the door to those kinds of things. And so I really believe this administration is under a curse, that everything they do is disaster, disaster, disaster. But my point is that I know people are waking up. So I have hope, and I want to say to everybody out there, you've got to fight. God calls you to fight. He calls you to have faith and a hope in the midst of lunacy, and you will see God move if you do your part. If you do nothing, and if you have some theology that says, well, it's not my job to speak about that, your theology is wrong, and you're going to see the fruit of your theology just as they did in Germany.
One of the things that I said to the people at the time when the Corona cult was happening, and people were trying to be good citizens, right? That's part of the Christian tradition, is we're the best of citizens. We're the ones that they look to and say, wow, I want what you have. And so we feel like there's almost this meekness that is used as a sense of having no authority or expectation of truth. And so I always tell the people, if there is a gray area, I mean, some things are clear: don't steal, don't kill, don't covet, right? There's some obvious non-negotiables in our faith. But sometimes you get something like a Corona thing pops out of the blue. We're not used to it. We don't really sure. We've never navigated this before, so we don't really know what we're doing. We're doing it on the fly. And one of the things I said to people, I said, the one thing you have as a Christian, the one thing you have, because if I was to define my faith in one word, it's truth. That's it. It's the truth. Immutable, transcendent truth. So if I am told by a bureaucrat, by a government official, by a mayor, by a governor, by my friends, by my nephew, by my mom, to do something that goes against my principles, and most importantly, it's based on a lie, reject it. Because now you know what's going on. You're being told to manipulate your conscience and the Spirit of God working in you for a lie, which is Satan's domain. Let me ask you this real quick. So because, and we got about, 10 minutes, unless you can go a little bit longer, but I just wanted to let you know in case you have to get off. But here's the thing. So one of the things I've noticed about the left, I saw it happening a long time ago, when the first ability with the marriage, same-sex marriage and so forth. Yeah. And I always wondered to myself, as a comic who loves the First Amendment and free speech, I always thought to myself, how are they going to circumvent religious liberties? Because it's the number one first line on our First Amendment. I wonder how they're ever going to get by that. It's pretty sacrosanct. And then I started seeing this come out 5, 7, 8 years ago. We're not going to, you're not going to get to be able to hide behind your religious beliefs as a smoke screen for your bigotry. And as soon as I heard that term, I goes, now my belief system is bigotry, and that trumps my belief system now. Right. So let me ask you this. When it comes to the abuse of language, remember, we are not, the problem in America is not systemic racism, because it doesn't exist. What it is systemic narcissism. That's what's destroying us, because these people live in a lie and accuse us every time of what they actually are. So Christian nationalism, used as a pejorative. Okay, where's the balance between Christians who are given this territory in America? I was born here. I'm responsible for it. I'm here to redeem it and to bring the best I can of Christ to this space. And when does it become maybe unbiblical? What would be the line between?
You know what I think? I'll give you two things. First of all, anytime anyone uses a term like Christian nationalism, whatever, that is your cue to get out of the conversation. Do not cast your pearls before swine. God's time and God's energy and God's gifts that he's given you, you do not use them for people who are not interested in the truth or interested in actually listening. Whenever somebody uses the term Christian nationalism, all they're doing is telling you, shut up. That's basically what they're doing. They're telling you, you are not allowed to advocate for your values, and I'm going to call it Christian nationalism. I'm going to say you're being political, you're a Christian nationalist. The moment someone says that, I know their agenda is evil. I know they don't care about America. They don't care about my faith. So we really have to just laugh in their face and walk away. I'm not going to convince someone who's crazy and an ideologue of anything, number one. Number two, in terms of the concept of Christian nationalism, there's nothing wrong with it. In other words, it's a made-up term. I'm commanded by God to live out my faith, and this country became great and has been great because of Christians living out their faith. So the idea that there's like, oh, there's a problem. Let me tell you what the problem is. The problem is Christians not living out their faith. The problem is Christians sitting on their hands. The problem is Christians not advocating for what is right and true. Christians led the battle against the slave trade. Christians led the battle for abolition in America. Does anybody have a problem with that? No, not today. Nobody would have the guts to say that that's a bad thing. But in that day, when Christians advocated for those things, there were tons of people who said, shut up and sit down. We're not interested in your bringing your Christianity into the public square and into politics. So this is all nonsense. And whenever anybody brings up something, I was speaking at an event. It was the first time I saw a copy of the book that I've been talking about, Led to the American Church. I was like, oh, haven't seen that before. It was in like August before the book came out. And I was speaking at a thing in New Jersey. And at the end of my talk, an older guy came up to me and said, do you denounce the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys? Like he was in my face, right? And I laughed and I said, are you kidding? Like you think they're the problem? Are they burning down cities? Like what? And you realize, Brad, and this is why we have to have mercy and grace, a lot of people have bought into this insane narrative. If you think Christian nationalists or conservative Christians or Oath Keepers or if you think they're the problem, you're smoking crack. You do not understand that Marxists have spent decades taking over our institutions. They're anti-American. They're anti-God. They have basically taken over the culture. And you're actually worried about like the Oath Keepers. I don't even know who they are. The Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys. You're smoking crack. And we have to let them know you're crazy. You think that's the problem. I am not even going to have a conversation with you because you obviously are paying no attention, or you're watching some news media that's feeding this narrative, and you're simply unaware of the reality in which most Americans live.
Well, and the only thing that makes sense is they're trying to conflate Christian nationalism to a theocracy, that we want to sort of force people to live by our Christianity.
But that's the point. Do you know anybody? I mean, I laugh. Like, speaking as a conservative Christian, I don't know a soul. I don't know anybody that is for theocracy, because theocracy completely violates religious liberty and the tenets of the American founding and the Constitution. So when people bring those things up, you know they're blowing smoke. They're just absolutely off in another world, and there's really no talking to them, frankly.
Well, let me since we know that journalism is dead, and we live with nothing but propaganda, which again is what fascism has to run by. The dissemination of information has to be controlled by those who don't allow anybody else to disagree or even to think differently. So that's where we're at. But because I'm a pseudo journalist, I got to have a gotcha. Every good journalist has to have a gotcha. So I'm going to have a gotcha for you, Eric, but I think it needs to be explored a bit. Donald Trump. So you've been a very staunch advocate of Donald Trump. I know that you and I discussed it during the election that I believe was stolen. And I think most people who think clearly realize that this was a bigger machine than we had ever known, controlling the game. But nevertheless, here we sit. So when I saw Ron DeSantis sort of take aggressive posture in Florida and do a wonderful job, and what a great guy. I really appreciated him when he won by 20% or whatever it was, landslide, and Trump kind of suddenly seemed to disdain him a bit or something, and I don't remember now, but I remember it just hit me wrong. It's like, dude, I thought we were kind of on the same team. You know, we are, aren't we kind of grateful when we have fellow-minded conservatives? And that just kind of didn't sit well with me.
Yeah.
So tell me about your thoughts on your commitment to Trump. I know what they are. They're just like me. We believe he stood for America first, defending our borders. But do you still feel the same moving into soon 2024 about Trump? And what is your thoughts on him as a Christian
and as a man who they want to constantly disparage his character based on his history.
Right. Well, I mean, I'll say this. I do think Trump is the man for 2024 for many reasons. And I do think he often gives people who like him reasons to hate him or dislike him. He always says things, you know, when he says Rhonda sanctimonious, I thought, really? Like,
Yeah, why? Why would he do
yourself
that?
in the foot again and again? Because, I mean, the reason you get upset is because you realize he's hurting himself, so it's just kind of foolish. But the point is, look, he's a human being. He is insanely talented. And with that comes the baggage of, you know, there's going to be a downside. And the downside is that he often says things like that or whatever. I think at the end of the day, whoever becomes the Republican nominee, of course I'm going to back them, because as far as I'm concerned, the alternative is satanic Marxism, atheistic Marxism.
Yeah.
So I believe it should be Trump. I think, look, DeSantis is a great guy, but he's very young, and I assume that 4 years from now, you know, he will get his turn, and he can get 8 years in the White House after Trump. That would be, I'd be thrilled. I'd be thrilled if he was Trump's running mate. I think, frankly, that you know, he's a hero, but he's just young, and I don't really see him. I don't think it would be wise for him to try to take the nomination away from Trump, because I think there is such a love of Trump in certain quarters in this country, people that have just been crushed by the system, and they see that he's a champion for them. And so I don't think anybody would have the ability. I don't think that Ron DeSantis has the ability to get crowds, you know, whipped up and in the same way. That being said, I will repeat myself. I love Ron DeSantis, and I think that, you know, if he ended up being our next president, I'd be thrilled to death. But I think probably he should wait his turn. We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, I mean, so what do we do about the voting scenario? What do we do about this situation where we no longer believe our votes are secure, that they're real, that they're happening? We don't believe anymore that we have a republic, which is the rule of the people. Because if my vote is being stolen, we're not a republic. We didn't keep it. We lost it. What do we do? How do we ensure? I mean, this is existential, buddy. This has to be fixed.
That's right.
Right now. What do we do?
Well, first of all, let me say that's why I think it's good that we didn't have a big red wave in 2022, because I think a lot of people have said, oh, we're okay now. We're fine. We're not okay. There is a level of corruption in our politics, specifically among the Democrats, that is so evil. If you do not deal with that, you will never have your country back. And I think that heroes like Kerry Lake and others, they're dealing with it. I know my friend Mike Lindell and others, they are dealing with it. The news doesn't report on them. Fox News doesn't even report on them. But there are folks behind the scenes working hard. And I would say that in some states, we are going to see reforms, and we're going to see people fighting for reforms. Other places are probably lost. It seems like Pennsylvania is just absolutely gone to the devil. I don't know. We shall see. But I guess the point is, we have to understand that that's what it is to fight for America, is to fight against corruption. And again, is corruption not a moral issue? This is a Christian issue, folks. When you see corruption, you know there's stealing going on. And you say, well, that's I don't want to be political. Stealing is not really that political. You should be against stealing. You should be against lying. You should be against corruption. You should be against stealing the votes of people who are legitimate American citizens and voters, and they're having their votes stolen. If you don't take a position on that, you're a fraud. You don't believe in anything. So I'm hopeful. But again, we've just got to be aware of the battle. God calls us to this battle. And you can't say, well, it's a tough battle. God has called us to this battle. And we need to be encouraged. Again, I wrote the book Letter to the American Church really to encourage people, to say, like, you're not crazy. You need encouragement. You need to know why you believe what you believe. You need to know that there are others that believe it. You need to know we're in a battle together. And by the way, what a glorious thing that God calls us to be part of what he is doing in our generation. So I am encouraged. I see all these things and I say, okay, so we have work to do. Praise the Lord. Let's get to work.
Well, but the biggest thing is, what can we actually practically do. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I saw this. I'm just going to read a couple of parts. It was on Twitter today. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vignano. I'm not a Catholic.
Vigano?
Yeah, you know this guy?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm not going to read the whole thing. It was quite long, but he has a couple quick tweets. For 2 years now, we've been witnessing a global coup d'etat in which a financial and ideological elite has succeeded in seizing control of parts of national governments, public and private institutions, the media, the judiciary, politicians, and religious leaders. All of these, without distinction, have become enslaved to these new masters who ensure power, money, and social affirmation to their accomplices. Fundamental rights, which up until yesterday were presented as invaluable, have been trampled underfoot in the name of an emergency. Today, a health emergency. Tomorrow, an ecological emergency. And after that, an internet emergency. This global coup d'etat deprives citizens of any possibility of defense, since the legislative, executive, and judicial powers are complicit in the violation of law, justice, and the purpose of which they exist. It is a global coup d'etat because this criminal attack against citizens extends to the whole world, with very rare exceptions. It's a world war where the enemies are all of us, even those who unwittingly have not yet understood the significance of what is happening. It's a war fought not with weapons, but with illegitimate rules, wicked economic policies, and intolerable limitations of natural rights. He goes on and on and on about we need a global commitment to Christ as Christians and fight a global anti-globalist alliance. We are there. It is time to say we're standing up. You will not touch us. You will not push us. You will not steal from us. We will fight, and this is why we have the most unique Constitution, including a Second Amendment that was to defend ourselves against evil. Here's where we sit. It's not a game. It's not, us using hyperbole so we can try to get some ratings or to sound good and make some money as conservatives. We are in the battle of our lives. It's Revolutionary War-ish. It's World War II-ish. Here we sit. So, Eric, if you were, and yes, Letters to American Church is a book you must get. I will put a link on here, folks. You got to get it just to get your pastors. Read it. Prepare for the militia of the mind as we decide to outthink, out-pray, out-believe these people. But if you were to leave a soundbite as we wrap this up, I want to be, take care of your time because you've been so gracious with me. But if you leave a soundbite that we can put out to social to not only drive them to this interview, but as the marching orders to believers worldwide, but certainly in the United States, from Eric Metaxas, what would you say, my brother?
Well, there's a famous quote. I don't believe Bonhoeffer actually said it, but it's often attributed to him, but it's simply true. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. God will not hold us guiltless. In other words, if you sit on your hands, if you say, I'm going to let somebody else fight the battle, I'm going to let somebody else be political, you are guilty. God calls his church to be, in the words of Bonhoeffer, the conscience of the state. We who call ourselves the church, I don't mean the organization, I mean we the people who say, I believe in Jesus, we are called by God to be the conscience, to be the voices, to be the hands and feet of God in this generation. And this is a glorious time where we get to live out our faith. We are in an existential crisis for liberty, for this nation, for liberty around the world that affects innumerable billions of people around the world. What you do, because of the power God has given us in America, because the power God has given those in his church, what we do now, every single one of us, will affect innumerable people, and God holds us responsible for those people. He has given us so much. To whom much is given, of them much will be required. We in the American church have been given more than anyone in history. God expects us to use it self-sacrificially for his purposes. So I see this as a glorious moment in history. If the church will rise up and be the church, we will see things we've never seen. We will see revival, we will see reformation, and we will praise the Lord. Right now, we are in the battle, and praise God, we have to fight.
Well, my brother, it couldn't have been said any more articulately. I love you. I'm grateful that you fight with me. And, hey, we have some damage to do for the kingdom while the getting's good. If we go down, let's go down like men, and let's show what Christianity really was supposed to feel like and look like. I give you, my friends, my good friend Eric Metaxas, warrior and courageous man of God. Be inspired by him, become like him, and let's watch what God will do if we just take him at his word. Thank you so much for being on Brad Stine Has Issues. I'm sure it was the time of your life. Oh, thank you so much, Eric. That was amazing, buddy.
Anytime. Listen, I love you. You know that, and I'm just glad we could work it out, because I've got big issues myself. And Brad Stine's not the only one who has issues.
I know. Well, listen, I met what's his name? The guy with Lure TV that you've been talking to, right?
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with them. They're amazing.
Yeah,
They're amazing
so
people.
They were kind of curious about my podcast and everything, and I've got some interesting people on. I was going to ask you, since we need to be a united front, if you know of anybody of note that you think resonates with what I believe in, because they may think of me as a comic and go, well, and I don't have a big giant show at this point, it's growing. But if you know anybody you think might, if you were to throw in a word in, would come on the show, just so I can build my profile and help build theirs, and we show that we are doing something. Yeah, I'd love it if you could help me in that regard. I've had some interesting folks on. John Rich is coming on next month, which is, big and rich, and Lauren Boebert was on, the congresswoman, and
she's fantastic.
Yes, so if she hasn't been on your show, I can contact her.
No, she's been on the show. I met her through Sean Foyt, actually, through a church in Colorado Springs. I met her, and I was like, wow, she's a big deal.
Yeah, she's legit.
I'm trying to think who. I can't think. If you think of somebody, shoot me an email or text or something. And if I have a connection, I'd be delighted. I can't.
Yeah, just had Jay Warner Wallace on. He was great, and Carol Swain was just on live. Great. Carol.
Yeah.
So yeah, God's growing this, and we need a comic who's a conservative and a Christian to stand up for these things too. So maybe it's me.
Yes. Well, it is you, I think.
Well, God bless you, brother. Have a great Christmas. If I don't talk to you, hopefully if I get to New York, I'll get on your show.
Oh, of course. If you get to New York, you can give me some warning and we'll work it out. And by the way, when do you air this program?
I'll either air it at the end of the but
I completely have given up,
buddy.
God bless you. Good to see you, buddy. Okay.
So, you have a choice. You can be terrified. You can be completely pessimistic. You can completely have given up, throw up your hands, and march to your doom, to the gulag, to the concentration camp, to the slave block, where you no longer are free to speak, to think, to vote, to be a participant, to be an American, but instead watch yourself be overrun by citizens, not Americans. Or the militia of the mind continues to strike back. It continues to find places in culture, in your community, that are a direct attack and a malicious attempt to undermine the freedoms of America. Find scenarios in academia that are counter to what is true about America, and make sure that you get groups of people who will go to school board meetings, who will say, we want this crap out now, or we're taking our kids out. You're going to make a big sacrifice. We need to create some homeschool buildings, and all the kids just flee there and start going there until we rot these academic institutions to oblivion. We have to demand that we have paper ballots so we can vote and count them and nobody can steal them. We have to demand we're the government and beg them to try to stop us when we are one and united. Guys, this is real. You have to find your battle, find your comrades in arms, and go take the land. Eric's written a lot of amazing things and a lot of amazing books. But the Letter to the American Church is such a wonderful sort of juxtaposition of Bonhoeffer. When you see what really happened that created really Nazi Germany, and see what's happening in America and see they're the same, you realize this isn't hyperbole. This is the last great stand if America is going to remain a republic, the people be free, and we are a sovereign nation. And that must mean that many, many, many of the people that are now representing us in Congress and the Senate and in the executive branch must be removed forever from any access to power or influence. Now, you're either ready to roll or you're not. That's why when we started the podcast, I said, what have you done today to fight for freedom? What have you actually done in your own little way, in your own simple way? What have you stood for? What have you said? Not in a bad way, not in a jerky way, not to be mean or malicious or malign, but just simply to stand for truth and honor because you know it's true and you know it's worth whatever comes your way, because freedom makes us decide who we are, cowards or courageous. And you have to decide. It's your turn to let people look at you and be impressed and inspired. Don't wait for the statues. Don't wait for the myths. Don't wait for the heroes of old. You become the new hero of America, the new militia of the mind. We're going to outthink them. We are going to outfight them. We're going to outvote them. And we will not back down until we bring them to their knees. You either want to be free or you don't, but there's no time to waste and not a minute too soon to get started. Listen, as I've told you a million times, political correctness from the Frankfurt School is cultural Marxism. Marxism hates God, hates Christianity, and hates freedom. It wants you to worship the state. Well, the state can kiss my big fat butt, but I will worship God Almighty, and He will see me through. I need you to join me, and I need to join you. If you have a church or a community, conservative group, or fundraiser in your area that would want a comic that speaks truth but uses humor to get it across, let me know. Let's fight together. Let's bring it in. Get to your church. Make that your battle. And say, we need God's comic into this church so we can show that we stand for truth and we are not afraid of reality. And people might just have a good time in the meantime. But political correctness is the means to destruction or the means for our salvation when we eliminate it. PC free is liberty. And liberty is absolutely essential. Remember, each Monday I'm here, 7 o'clock, Facebook and YouTube. I need you to subscribe if you haven't. I need you to share the crap out of this. I need you guys to seek, to donate if you want this to grow, and we can do even more interesting things. It's all up to you. I'm here anyway, whether you do or not, but obviously the more I'm able to help and add things to this and special new episodes, amongst which are the Warrior Pastor series, I'm going to be able to keep doing it, and you're going to help me. This is how the militia works together. Sharing ammo, fighting the good fight, and in the end, God wins. Every time. This is God's Comic, Brad Stine. And listen, all I'm doing is putting the woke back to sleep. See you next Monday, God willing.